In a stunning Senate hearing where both Democrats and Republicans attacked Pete Hegseth, our drunk Secretary of Defense, Pete Hegseth admitted that he would not follow court orders. We are so past the looking glass here. I also have a Republican who attacked Pete Hegseth, and Tim Kaine, Senator Tim Kaine, caught Pete Hegseth in a lie. First, here is one of the senators laying into Pete Hegseth over his $50,000 hush money for a sexual assault allegation. Incredible.
At your confirmation hearing, my Democratic colleagues and I rightly questioned whether you had the requisite qualifications and experience to lead the DoD, the largest federal agency, especially given your checkered past, which included paying $50,000 in hush money to settle a sexual assault allegation against you and driving 2 veterans organizations into the ground. After only months on the job, our concerns about you have proven true, as far as I'm concerned. Instead of strengthening national security, you've turned the Pentagon into a dysfunctional mess. You are jeopardizing military operations and service members' lives with your unprecedented action of texting classified military plans to anyone who might stroke your ego. Leading the Department of Defense is more than just a PR campaign filled with photo ops. While you pose for cameras, Russia's war of aggression against Ukraine continues unabated. Israel and Iran are also at war, in large part because your boss tore up a multilateral agreement former President Obama brokered with the UK, France, Germany, China, and Russia that curbed Iran's nuclear program and ambitions. Meanwhile, China advances in the Pacific as this regime undermines and attacks our allies. At a time when steady leadership is critical, we are confronted with crisis and instability.
Kind of incredible to have it all laid out like that, right? We are so lost with this regime who are in charge right now. She was also very smart to ask Pete Hegseth a simple question about whether he would follow federal court orders, and watch how he responds.
Let's face it, it is not normal to call up our troops in this way, and there is active litigation against this deployment. Will you follow a court's order regarding whether or not this deployment is legal? If the court says this deployment of troops into our cities is not legal, would you follow that court's order?
It's pending in the courts, Senator.
Well, when the court decides, would you follow that court's order decision?
I don't believe district courts should be determining national security policy.
So you will not be following that.
When it goes to the Supreme Court, we'll see.
Court. And unless the president decides to appeal, there you have it. So I take it that you don't consider district court decisions to be legitimate. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Insane, right? And so just to go to show that this is DoD policy, that they're not going to obey the courts, they reposted this, says, I don't believe district courts should be determining national security policy. And then the senator said, I don't believe Pete Hegseth understands the Constitution. I think he understands it. I just don't think he cares. And when pressed against that same question from Elizabeth Warren, here's how Pete Hegseth handled it. And then I have Tim Kaine calling out his lie right after this.
How many troops can you deploy domestically before you start to cut into our readiness internationally?
As I said, previous administrations deployed our National Guard all around the globe in numbers far beyond what we were capable of supporting. So limited contingencies inside the United States to protect federal law enforcement is doable.
If the Supreme Court orders you to remove troops from American city streets, will you do so?
Can you repeat the question, please?
Yes. If the Supreme Court orders you to remove troops from American cities, will you do so?
As I've said, Senator, I don't believe district courts should determine national security policy, but if the Supreme Court rules on a topic, we will abide by that.
Yeah, and as one commentator said here, okay, so the administration's position is that the law doesn't bind them. we are in a very scary place right now where the Department of Defense has a secretary who does not think the law should be abided by, that courts don't matter unless it comes from the Supreme Court. That's not how the Constitution works. And Senator Tim Kaine also showed that these people just have no moral authority either. Not that we needed to know that, but it was on full display when he got called out for this lie. When he was asked if the Gregg family was told that their dad's name was no longer named after a base, and they renamed it to a Confederate, a member of the Confederacy, a traitor. And watch how he gets tripped up in this lie.
Civil War. Why did you decide that these 4 patriots were not worthy enough to have their names on a base?
Well, Senator, as you know, this was never about the names of the bases they were renamed to.
So you don't challenge the worthiness.
Restoring all bases to their original name, because we're not about erasing history.
Okay, you don't care about their military record. You wanted to restore the Confederate names. When you called the Gregg family to tell them that their dad's name was no longer going to be on the base, what was their reaction?
Senator, the Army notified them of that.
You didn't call any of the families, and I've spoken with the families, and the families were called by the press. That's how they learned about this. They learned about it from the press. You didn't call the Barfoot family, the Gregg family, and you didn't call the Adams family. I told the families I'd ask you about this today. In fact, 2 of General Gregg's granddaughters, Avery and Sydney, are right here in the audience, and I want to ask you this as I close. While you announced that these brave men and women's names would be stripped from the Virginia bases, no orders to that effect have been received by the base commanders. In light of the patriotic service of Van Barfoot, Arthur Gregg, Charity Adams, and Mary Walker, I'd like to ask you simply not to issue the orders changing the names of these Virginia bases. These families, my Commonwealth, are very proud of these heroes, very satisfied with these names, and ask you not to change them. Will you honor these exemplary patriots and keep their worthy names in places on the bases they loved and where they served?
Well, Senator, we very much thank and appreciate them for their service, and we'll find ways to recognize them, but the orders will soon be going to those bases to change the names back to the original name that never should have been changed.
But you have the power to not send those orders. They haven't gone out yet, correct?
Thank you. Senator, your time has expired. Senator Kaine.
Congrats to Tim Kaine for, calling him out like that. If you liked that, please hit like on this video and make sure that more people see this message and see Tim Kaine own Pete Hegseth. And let's end with this, because in a stunning moment, Roger Wicker, who is a Republican, ripped Pete Hegseth for being completely untransparent. Watch.
What we have in front of us is an inadequate budget request with precious little detail and no follow-on data about fiscal years 2027, 2028, or 2029. We must assume, and in fact, we have heard, that OMB intends to maintain defense spending at $893 billion across the 4 years of this administration. So even with a one-time $150 billion reconciliation infusion, this would leave us at 2.65% of GDP by 2029.
All right, really, that was some really dull stuff there, but this is pushing back in the Republican Party when you are doing anything that goes against what Trump wants. So it's a big deal he did this. I'm sorry it was dull, but it is stunning that a Republican is calling out the Department of Defense and its secretary, the one who Donald Trump wants in there more than anyone else. It is stunning that he would call him out like that for being untransparent. I don't think it's going to make a difference, but it is a hint that Republicans are not in line completely with what Trump is doing, especially the Senate. I think the Senate is really going to be, it could be the thing that saves us. I can't believe we have to rely on like 5 Republican senators to perhaps save our republic, but that's where we are. But I'm glad you are here with me and watching this video, and I'm so glad you're, I'm so grateful you're a part of the community. Sorry, my throat got choked up there. If you like this video, please hit like on the video. If you're not subscribed, please consider subscribing, and I will learn how to talk for the next time. Thanks so much. Bye.